Everybody, before we actually officially start, I will just ask you to please mute your cell phones. All right, it is 5:30, and I want to officially open the Brevard City Council regular meeting of Monday, November 4th, and to welcome everybody that has joined us here in person, as well as everybody that is watching the live stream. As we start, I want to go ahead and introduce the people sitting up here. On my far right is our city attorney, Mac McKellar. Next to him is City Councilman Lauren Wise. Then normally, Councilwoman Pamela Holder would be seated next to Mr. Wise. I believe she will probably join us later this evening. Then we've got Councilman Mac Morrow. I am Mayor Maureen Kopoloff. To my immediate left, we've got our city clerk, Denise Hodgson. Next to her, we've got Mayor Pro Tem and Councilman Gary Daniel. Next to Gary, we've got Councilman Aaron Baker. And on the far left, we have our city manager, Wilson Hooper. With that, I'm very pleased to ask Shelley Webb, who is the Executive Director of Sharing House, to please come up and to give our invocation tonight. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. I'm always honored to be in the presence of you all, who, especially one who's celebrating a birthday. I read that on Facebook.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So let us pray. Oh God, may we know the hope that is not just for someday, but for this day. Here, now, in this moment that opens to us, a hope that's not made of wishes, but of substance. A hope that's made of sinew and muscle and bone. A hope that has breath and a beating heart. Hope that will not keep quiet and be polite. A hope that knows how to holler when it's called for, and a hope that knows how to sing when there seems little cause. Oh God, give to us hope that raises us from the dead, not someday, but this day, every day, again and again and again. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Shelley, before you leave, yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Sharing House has been doing with the hurricane relief effort?
Yes, you can tell I'm a little ragged. Sharing House has been one of many agencies, and including our government representatives, who have been at the forefront of just making sure that people have what they need. The needs are continuing. We still have, just today we paid for someone's dentures to be replaced because that's something that they had lost in the hurricane. We have been receiving donations from all over the country. We, like many here in this county, who've taken up resources, in-kind donations, everything that you can imagine. We've actually run out of space, and it's maybe the first time where I've had to really wrestle with, managing a nonprofit with little resources is difficult. Managing a nonprofit with abundance of resource is just as difficult, just so you know. But yeah, we have taken in quite a bit of money, as well as other agencies have. We are partnering, we are working together as helping agencies throughout the community with Habitat for Humanity, with the Family Place, with the Haven, with the Cove, with so many people trying to make sure that those, especially those who are unhoused right now, are getting what they need. So we continue to lift our prayers, and prayers have feet and hands, and we have seen it in abundance this go-round. We don't ever want to see this again, but to all of you who have given much, I know that so many people are grateful. We see it every day, tears, and just grateful. Just people are grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for everything that Sharing House does for us. If everyone would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, honor, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you do have a quorum, all members present except for Councilwoman Holder.
Okay. Council, do I have a motion to officially excuse Councilwoman Holder from tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, she is officially excused. Council, you got the draft agenda sent out to you. Are there any proposed changes to the draft agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that we take item M1, which is the only item there, the designation of the ABC Board Chair, and move that to the consent agenda.
Okay. Are there any other proposed changes?
Madam Mayor, unfortunately, may I request that a closed session for pending litigation be conducted? Should be pretty brief.
Okay. Any other changes, Council? All right, do I have a motion to approve the revised agenda with the 2 modifications?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The modified agenda is approved. Council, you received the minutes of the October 21st, 2024 regular meeting. Are there any corrections or modifications to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We now have public comments. All right. Well, the public is invited to speak during public comment at this time on any topic unless it is a public hearing item on the agenda, of which we have 2. If you desire to speak during public comment, you need to sign your name, address, and telephone number on the sign-up sheet. And nobody from the public has signed up to speak tonight. So I will open and then just close public comment. Okay, Madam Clerk. All right. All right, we will move on to our presentation, actually. And today, I am issuing a proclamation. You know, proclamations are issued when something is important enough that we really want to emphasize it to the public. We want to raise the visibility of something. So today, we are doing a proclamation commemorating Veterans Day. How many people in here are veterans? Pretty good percentage here. Yeah. I think it's an important day. I know it's a day that means a lot to me, it means a lot to veterans and to their families. And so here is Proclamation 2024, TAC 23, commemorating Veterans Day, November 11th, 2024. Whereas the freedoms we enjoy as Americans have been purchased and maintained at a high price throughout our history. And whereas, since the establishment of the original 13 states, Americans have been willing to fight and die to preserve their individual rights as guaranteed in the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And whereas, we owe a great debt to those who have served in defense of this nation, as throughout the generations, their sacrifices have preserved our unique form of government, dedicated to human rights and respect for the individual. Whereas for many, that sacrifice had ended in permanent injury or death, yet their spirit remains in the continued preservation of our freedoms and the promise of liberty established as an example for all the oppressed persons of the world. And whereas, in honor of these dedicated men and women, we pledge our continued defense of our nation so that their sacrifice will stand before the entire world as a tribute to the spirit and determination of people dedicated to the principles of freedom and democracy. Now, therefore, I, Maureen Koploff, Mayor of the City of Brevard, North Carolina, call upon our citizens to salute all Brevard and Transylvania County veterans who have served with honor and distinction, and to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies in honor of our veterans, both living and deceased, who have served this country so willingly to preserve the principles of justice, freedom, and democracy, to fly the flag, and to show our veterans we appreciate their great sacrifice. Thank you. And we will, of course, on November 11th, be having our Veterans Day ceremony. It will be at a slightly different time this year. It's going to be starting at 10:15. I know we normally start it at 11 o'clock because, of course, Veterans Day was the 11th hour of the 11th month, 11th day of the 11th month when World War I ended. And instead of starting at 11, we're going to be ending at 11 with some of the church bells ringing. So just a slightly different twist, so I encourage you, please make sure you get there at the proper time. It's going to be in front of the courthouse like it always is. And take just a few minutes to think about the sacrifice that so many of our men and women made so that we live in freedom and democracy and respect and appreciation of every individual. So, thank you, and I'll see you at Veterans Day. All right, we are now going to move on to our public hearings. Our first public hearing is the proposed City of Brevard Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, re Pisgah Forest Gateway District. And I believe Mr. Aaron Bland, our Assistant Planning Director, is going to give an overview.
Yes, thank you. So you have two public hearings on your agenda. This presentation will kind of cover both of them. So I want to go over the background of why we have initiated this. This is a staff-initiated rezoning and the creating of a brand-new zoning district. So I want to give a little bit of information on why we're doing this. Why would we rezone the Pisgah Gateway entrance area? It has to do a lot of just the character of that area, but also what it's undergoing right now. It's seeing a big change through the new intersection project from NCDOT that's currently under construction. The city's also going to be doing some betterments and having the entrance sign and the big major new roundabout there. So that area is getting a little influx of character and uniqueness. The current zoning of that area is inappropriate for its context. It's mostly zoned the same as downtown, and the forest entrance is not the same as downtown. We've had issues with that from permitting standpoint, people trying to plan new projects with the same regulations as the downtown area has caused some issues over the years. It's also a bit more of a rustic setting, more outdoor focused setting than downtown, which is of course a most urban core type of setting. So those are sort of incongruent. We're looking to create a new district that captures the unique character of this area. It's a very important area, very visible area. A lot of visitors and people coming to visit their family or friends who live here. They pass through that area. It's their first kind of taste of Brevard, so to speak. And so some more specific context-sensitive standards we think are appropriate. And then the architectural standards for this area are coming later. You guys are aware of that project. Architectural standards citywide are under review, but this is one of the unique character areas that's going to get its own sort of additional standards that are even more context-sensitive. So when those come down the pike for a text amendment, we want this district to be in place so that area has its own specific zoning districts we can apply those new architectural standards to. We have done some planning work in this area over the years. One of the things we've done is the Pisgah Forest Small Area Plan. That was done between 2015 and 2016. However, it was not officially adopted by council, but it was a document that was worked on for a long time and got a lot of public input. And it had similar goals to what I just described, establishing a bold gateway for the National Forest. It discussed how the Pisgah Forest area acquired a different form and character than downtown, speaking to that, zoning being the same for both, but not quite doing what it needs to do. And it encouraged a mountain architectural style in the area to go a long way towards developing a sense of place. And so it mentioned traditional mountain and modern mountain architectural styles. And so that's what's coming later with the architectural update, but again, we need this district in place to apply those standards to when they come through. The Building Brevard 2030 Comprehensive Land Use Plan also speaks to this area and has a very clear directive to establish an overlay district for this area. We're kind of taking that one step farther than an overlay district, and again, saying that the downtown mixed-use district is just, it's not appropriate even with an overlay over top of it. We need to just give it its own unique district. So we're kind of taking that one step further than the comp plan suggests. When we decided to do this, we started off, or we kicked off some public engagement events. We had several events here at City Hall with just drop-in people talking about that area, what they want to see there, what they think works, what they think doesn't work, the area. Some of the themes that kind of bubbled up from all the input we received, people want to see increased walkability and bikeability in that area. They agree that it has a unique character that we need to capitalize and kind of lean into, and that a lot of that revolves around recreational uses. There was a discussion about how it needs to connect into the National Forest, but we also need to connect that area into town. Folks who just visit Pisgah National Forest we need to try to draw them into town as well and not have their entire Brevard experience be just down there at the entrance to the forest. So that's just one of the boards we had up where people were writing comments and then adding their dots if they agreed with something that was already said. So again, several public input events. We sent letters to all the property owners and all the tenants of the commercial structures out there to invite them to that. Had conversations with some of them over the phone, and a lot of them showed up for these events too, which was great. So what exactly are we proposing? We're proposing, like I said, a brand new zoning district, the Pisgah Gateway Mixed Use District. It'll go by PGX to kind of match our current zoning district nomenclature. And the area where we're proposing to apply this is the same as the character area in the visual guidelines document that you all received and endorsed earlier this year as part of the architectural standards update. So it's this area highlighted here, centered around that main intersection of US 64, US 276, NC 280. It includes the Walmart Shopping Center, also extends down Henderson Highway down to where Deaver Road connects back to 64. But going south, it stops along the river. It does not cross the Davison River going up Asheville Highway. The planning board, however, in their recommendation, I'll show another map about this later, but they recommended omitting the single-family houses that front on Deaver Road. But staff is continuing to recommend that this entire area, the entire character area for the architectural character area, be included to avoid split zoning some of those parcels that front on both the highway and Deaver Road. So this is the current zoning map of this area with the area that was just highlighted, bordered in the white. So our staff proposal is, again, just to rezone this entire area, the new PGX district. The planning board's recommendation, is to omit those little orange parcels that front Deaver Road. So I don't know if you can kind of, just a little kind of sliver there along that curve, but those have single-family houses and which under the proposal would not be an allowed use. They would be grandfathered in, but there was a concern that folks trying to upgrade their home or work on their home might not be allowed to over time. And so the planning board ultimately recommended a slightly smaller area to be rezoned. The future land map of the comprehensive plan identifies the large chunk of this area, and that kind of reddish pink area is a major activity center. The larger parcels that border the forest are in the kind of conservation natural area. And then towards the southeast, I guess, that brownish color is the urban corridor. And again, all those parcels that front Greenville or Hendersonville Highway and Deaver Road are in their totality the urban corridor area, which is why we are maintaining our recommendation to rezone the entire area. So I'll get into just a couple of the highlights of the actual zoning regulations themselves. You have the entire draft amendments in your packet. I'm happy to go over any specific questions you have, but just want to hit some highlights. We used neighborhood mixed use as our starting point to craft some of these, but ultimately what we wrote sort of falls between neighborhood mixed use and downtown mixed use in terms of intensity, how big and close buildings can be to the road and things like that. We went over the allowable land uses in great detail, trying to come up with what uses are most compatible with that forest entrance area, again, leaning heavily into things like lodging and outdoor and indoor recreational uses. And just a reminder, this does not include the actual meat and potatoes of the architectural standards. That's coming later. But we need this district in place to apply those to when that time comes. And for parking, we added this to the Tier 2. If you remember our new parking standards set up, Tier 2 has both a minimum and a maximum of allowed parking for all new land uses. And then ground signs limited to 32 square feet. The other kind of big item when it comes to the actual regulations themselves is the setbacks. So we're proposing 15-foot setback in the front from the right-of-way, 10 feet on the sides, or 6 feet on the sides and 10 feet in the rear. The land use matrix, again, we used neighborhood mixed use as a starting point and added and removed different uses that seemed appropriate or not for the context of this gateway area and its setting adjacent to the forest. Some of the highlights here, like I said before, single-family dwellings were not an allowed use, but existing ones would be allowed to continue to be, lived in. All lodging uses were allowed. This is a highly kind of tourist-focused area, and many commercial, retail, recreational, and then like restaurant uses like that are allowed with very limited manufacturing. That's just a snippet at the very beginning of the land use matrix. Again, the whole thing's in your packet. If you want to go over some specific uses, I'm happy to talk about those. Moving on to landscaping standards. Again, this kind of fell between neighborhood mixed use and downtown mixed use when it comes to buffering any new development from adjacent districts that might be different. And similarly with the building type by district, we allowed almost everything except for, again, single-family houses. This is sort of an interim measure before the new architectural standards come, and this would be the most significant change that actual, property owners or developers would see right now before those new standards come, because we would be allowing the commercial building type, which can be one story. Right now, that's not allowed in the DMX area that's zoned out there right now, which means all new buildings have to be 2 stories, which may or may not be context appropriate. So we're allowing that sort of flexibility in the interim until the more specific architectural standards come. The planning board had 2 very minor recommendations changes that they recommended. One was to add places of worship as a by right use, and then they also recommended changing the front yard setback from the 15 feet to the edge of the right of way. So that's all I have to kind of go over the high points. Again, happy to discuss the details if you have more specific questions, but as far as the timing goes, the planning board has discussed this at multiple meetings, and ultimately in September offered their recommendation to you with their minor changes that I discussed. You are holding 2 public hearings tonight, one for the text amendment to the ordinance to create the standards of the district, and the other is a map amendment to actually put the zoning district on our zoning map and create the district. So you have to do each one of those as its own step, but again, this presentation kind of covers both. And then at your next meeting, we would ask you to possibly vote on both of those. So that's all I have prepared. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bland. At this time, we will officially open the public hearing. Council, do I have a motion to open the public hearing on the text amendment?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the public hearing is open. Okay, oops, wait a minute, where's my public hearing? Okay. During the public hearing, the public is asked to adhere to the following guidelines. Register with the city clerk by printing your name, address, and phone number on the sign-in sheet, which is done. When it is your turn, step to the podium in front of city council. State your name and address clearly. Be concise, avoid repetition, and limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Direct comments to the full council, not to an individual council member or to staff. This is a time to provide your comments but not to ask questions. A public hearing is not an appropriate venue for a question and answer session. Designate a spokesperson for large groups, and each person may speak once for a specific public hearing. We have one individual who has signed up to speak at the public hearing, and that's Ms. Donna Duty. Donna, please come forward.
Thank you. I had some concerns on my father passed and he was a veteran earlier this year. He was 93. He lives at 212 Brevard Road. And by us, they were allowed to build a big wall and raise their property up for commercial next door to me, to his house. Well, when the flood come, it just stops at the wall. It took our flow, our natural flow of water through the house and the pasture into the drains. There's no drainage. So when the flood happened a few weeks, I know it was a lot of rain. It just built up at the wall and it just kept rising. It was 44 inches, just kept before it started receding some. So I have a issue that because his land, they're working on the road behind us, 64, and they've already built the bank. They took the ditch line, so we don't have a ditch. I've asked them to please put some kind of ditch to drain it to the creek, which sits behind Pisgah Forest. So my question is, if that's a flood zone, which it is now, they consider it a flood zone, and they build up, I'm going to have a wall behind the house, just like the wall that sits next to us, and then we'll be like a fishbowl with the water because there's no drainage. So my problem was, what does that do my property value? Because, it's a big concern, and I do have pictures showing the wall and showing what it does. So if you'd like to see any of those, I have them on my phone.
Okay.
So that's a big concern with me, to zone it in, because the property goes downhill, and I know they won't build on the bottom. They'll raise it up like they did the property next to us. And like I said, there's no drainage. They said they were going to put drainage in, but no drainage whatsoever. It just stops at the wall. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Duty. Appreciate it. That is everyone that has signed up for this public hearing. Council, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and just an explanation, Ms. Duty, you will not get a direct answer from council right after, but the point of the public hearing is for council to hear your concerns and to consider it when they deliberate on this over the next 2 weeks before they actually vote at the next meeting. All right, at this point, we will open it up for discussion for council to ask questions of the staff. And let's start with Mr. Wise.
All right, thanks for the presentation, thanks for the comments. Could we revisit slightly this Dever Road planning department or planning board recommendation to pull those single-family residents out? You said you were worried about some split zoning in that area,
Yeah, several of those properties, they front on both the highway and Dever Road.
right?
They're currently split zoned between DMX or CMX on the highway side, and then the residential mixed use, which is the orange on the Dever Road side.
Gotcha. And under the new PSX, they would be grandfathered in as,
Yeah,
what,
they'd be
RR?
considered a pre-existing nonconformity, so as long as they're lived in, they'd be allowed to continue to be lived in as long as they're lived in.
But what would they be zoned as in that
The
case?
PGX, the same district as the rest.
So I guess I'm confused. If someone sells a house and wants to do improvements on their residence as a single family, are they obliged to follow these setback and zoning
Yeah, they can-
requirements?
They can still add on to a single-family house. Houses are treated a little bit differently in the nonconformities. and we went round and round on this with the planning board. I think their main concern was actually with a few mobile homes that were out there that would not be allowed to upgrade essentially to a stick-built house. They could maintain the mobile home,
Right.
or you could maintain a stick-built house, but a brand-new traditional home would not be permitted if it was not an allowed use.
Okay. I want to think about that a little bit more, because I don't know if that's kind of new information I want to try to understand a little better, because I want to make sure these people are protected, and I understand what you're saying, but I have concerns that, I just want to make sure that people who want to continue to live there, sell their homes there, and do improvements have that ability.
They do, they will.
Outside of that, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Morrow?
I want to say congratulations to you and your staff for initiating yet another improvement to the UDO. And you mentioned the Pisgah's plan, and most people probably don't realize it, but had staff not done that back in 2015, 2016, we wouldn't have the NCDO improvements that are going on there now. We wouldn't have the landscape improvements that are scheduled to go there now. So it follows in a pattern of trying to make that Gateway, as we had that conference way back, the Gateway Conference, wasn't that about 2015, about that same time?
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah,
You
that
know,
was
the
a while.
college and everybody got around
Plan.
and
Yep.
Kaporium jumped in and thank you, they put in hot spots and made some improvements that came out of that recommendation. So this has been now we're in our about 10th year of trying to figure out what we're gonna do with this. And I congratulate you for where you're going and where you're coming on it. So, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the plan is funny, it wasn't adopted, but we're following a lot of the recommendations of it. The roundabouts and the betterments, all that stuff's in there.
Oh, yeah, because, and it wouldn't have happened had the city not invested the conceptual planning and et cetera, so, thank you.
Mr. Daniel?
Yeah. So I think some clarification might be helpful on the spot zoning of the Deaver Road. I mean, we're talking about, what, 14 lots? They would be the only pieces of property with that zoning in that whole area.
Correct.
And
It's,
then-
it's enough individual properties, enough property owners. We're not worried about spot zoning, but, I mean, it would still be the only kind of island of that district.
What'd you say, what was the first part of that?
It's enough, the number of properties and property owners is enough that I'm not really worried about it being considered spot zoning.
Okay. That helps me. All right. No, I have no other questions about it.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, curious, I noticed that the allowable density for new residential development was slightly less than sort of the highest density allowed in, I can't remember which zoning district it is.
Well, the highest is downtown, which has no cap.
Right, right.
But then after that, it's quarter mixed use, which is 40 dwelling units an acre, and we're proposing 30.
Yeah, I was just curious what the logic behind being slightly less than corridor mixed use is.
I think ultimately, we didn't necessarily want the same degree of potential, like apartment buildings and things like that in this area, as we would on a more kind of auto-focused corridor that could handle that. And again, we were sort of shooting for a middle ground between neighborhood mixed use and downtown. So we just kind of went in the middle there.
Okay,
It's just a starting point
Right.
for discussion here.
okay. And was there any discussion, I noticed, we've had lots of discussions in the past about parking minimums and parking maximums, and we have new rules in regards to that, but this area in particular has, some very large parking lots that, probably 30 to 40% of that area is a parking lot. So I know we've discussed potential redevelopment of parking areas before. Did that enter into the discussion at all?
Not especially. I mean, the redevelopment of the major shopping center and its parking lot is something that the comp plan speaks to and that the small area plan both spoke to. I think part of the reasoning for putting it in tier 2, which has that maximum cap for parking, would be to make better use of that space, should it be redeveloped, and not let such a sea of parking eat up all that land. But we didn't really discuss it a whole lot at the planning board level.
Okay. And is there any other tool that we could add to sort of, to encourage that, or is it really just the parking maximum?
To encourage less parking?
Or, yeah, and redevelopment of those large parking lots?
Not necessarily through this district. I mean,
Okay.
but other programs could attempt to do that.
Right, okay. And I know that we're still developing the standards for the architectural rules, but will that also include sort of a visual of what that sort of ideal new development might look like in a?
That's what the visual guideline document that I mentioned, I think it was June where we looked at that. That does just that. It's basically a good visual representation of what we're looking for in different parts of town, and including this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the standards will essentially apply that.
Codify a lot of that stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. I think those are all my questions.
Okay. Well, council, if there are no more questions or comments on this public hearing, we will move to our next public hearing. I will just mention, Mr. Manager, I assume you have the concerns raised during the public hearing by Ms. Duty for staff to look into.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we will, all right, we will move on to our second public hearing, which is the proposed City of Brevard zoning map amendment, re the Pisgah Forest Gateway District. Mr. Bland, did you want to say anything else, or should we just go right into it?
No, just a reminder that, so that you have to amend the ordinance to create the text of the new district, and you have to amend the zoning map to actually apply the district to a geographic area. So that's what this one would be, is that second version. So
Okay. Council, do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So,
Second.
Okay, did you get that, Madam Clerk? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are in the public hearing. Nobody signed up to speak at this public hearing, so therefore, council, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
and second?
All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is closed. Okay, moving on to consent and information. The following items are on the consent agenda. Resolution fixing a date of a public hearing for annexation, Mills Avenue Properties LLC, Forest Hill Drive. 2, resolution authorizing staff to renew adopt a green space contracts. 3, resolution accepting $352,000 grant for wastewater treatment plant engineering. 4, capital project amendment, wastewater treatment plant, $352,000 grant funding, SRP W134-0175. 5, Public Safety Committee minutes, July 22nd of '24. 6, the Acoustic Trail Advisory Board minutes of August 22nd, 2024. 7, Council Rosenwald Community Advisory Board minutes of August 27th, 2024. 8, the Acoustic Trail Advisory Board minutes of September 5th, 2024. 9, Finance, Human Resources, and Citizen Appointment Committee minutes, September 17th of 2024. 10, the Acoustic Trail Advisory Board minutes, September 25th of 2024. 11, correspondence, ABC Board minutes of August 22nd, 2024. And number 12, the designation of the ABC Board Chair, which was moved from new business up to consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to unfinished business. Our first item is the proposed amendments to the City of Brevard Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, 46, and 62, the sidewalk usage policy. And I believe Emily Brewer, one of our our city planners, is going to give us an overview.
Yes, thank you. This is for the vote on this item. You held a public hearing on this at your last meeting. But as a reminder, this is a staff-initiated text amendment to ensure that all of the items, whether they be merchandise, planters, furnishings, et cetera, that are placed within the city or state rights-of-way have insurance and meet the minimum separation requirements. The proposed changes come from some discussions that we've had with the North Carolina League of Municipalities, which is the city's insurance provider, in addition to many, many meetings with the Downtown Master Plan Committee. And the most recent was on August 29th, when the committee recommended the version that is before you today unanimously, and with some tweaks that they made. So that version is before you today. The proposed changes also aim to reduce the burden on business owners by making this a one-time permit. This has been something that we've been talking about for a while, and I discussed it at length at the last meeting. But we are now asking that you take action on this item. The following actions are available to you. Adopt the amendment as proposed. Adopt the amendment as revised by you, City Council. Reject the amendment. Send the amendment back to a committee for further study and consideration, or call for additional public hearings and discussion on the matter. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions and clarify anything that comes up.
Council, do I have a motion regarding the amendment?
Propose we accept the proposed amendment of the City of Brevard Code of Ordinances, Chapter 146 and 62, sidewalk usage policy.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll open it for discussion. Mr. Daniel?
Well, I'm on the Downtown Master Plan Committee, and we did have a lot of meetings because it was so much fun. But actually, I think we went into this realizing that there was an issue, and realized quickly that there were some unintended consequences to some of our thought process. I think it was thoroughly discussed, and I think that not everyone is exactly happy, but everyone has accepted this proposal as it's being presented. So I support it.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this many times, and appreciate the sort of deliberate and intentional nature with which we've tackled it, and I think we ended up in a good place.
Mr. Morrow?
No comments.
Mr. Wise?
Yeah, I think this is a great example of something that needed to happen that was complicated and challenging. I think we have something very solid. Good work, everyone. Thanks.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is approved. Moving on to our second item of unfinished business, we have approval of the Pisgah Labs agreement and acceptance of the U.S. EDA grant. I believe our city manager is going to open discussion.
Yes, ma'am. So in September of 2023, you all agreed to consider exceptions to your traditional annexation requirement for properties that wish to tap onto the city's wastewater system. That requirement, I think, was based on the notion that wastewater capacity is scarce and only folks who contribute to the city tax base should have access to that resource. And it is scarce, but access to utilities is a strong tool for economic development that we need because we are a high-cost area. We have fewer transportation connections to market than other regions, and so we have some inherent challenges that we need to use other tools to try to overcome, and access to utilities is one of them. And so to your credit, you agreed to consider exceptions to the policy according to certain conditions, and that's what we're going to talk about here. And those conditions are slated to go in an economic development agreement with Pisgah Labs, also known as Project Vital, so that they can connect to our municipal utilities, particularly wastewater, and support their expansion in that way. Just as a reminder, that project has already been awarded state and county incentives, and it pledges to provide $55 million in investment and 55 well-paying jobs over the next few years. If we had required them to annex right away, it would have taxed, literally, the company's pro forma and might have put the expansion at risk, whereas connection to municipal utilities would save the company some operating cost and have perhaps made the investment a safer bet. But for the benefit of our new council members who came in at the tail end of this negotiation and for the viewers online, I just want to say that council's not interested in selling the farm. And so, as I alluded to earlier, there are conditions that must be met by the company. And as I said, those will be the focus of my presentation tonight, and they are up on the screen. And I want to go over those one by one. And if you agree, council, to move forward with the negotiation under these conditions, I'll ask that you memorialize that decision by approving the draft resolution that's in your package. So on the screen, it divides up the terms of the agreement according to the commitments of both parties. And as you can see at the top, our commitments are we'll build the line and we'll let them tap on. And so really the time I have left, I want to spend talking about their commitments, so the terms that under which they'll be allowed to connect. The first condition is that the city not be on the hook financially for construction of the lines that are needed to provide the service. And we've actually done our part there, winning a $2.4 million, just a little less than $2.4 million grant from the United States Economic Development Administration and receiving a corresponding pledge from Transylvania County for the $593,000 local match that grant requires. So we won't be asked, or we won't be required to provide any cash up front, although once it's constructed, we will have the liability for maintaining and owning that pipe. The second condition is that the company follow through and meet all the requirements of its incentive agreement with the county. So the jobs and the investment that are codified in that agreement. If they don't, they'll be subject to the clawback provisions that are in that agreement, but also one of our own, which I'll go back to in a minute. The third condition is that they remove their property from the floodplain using a FEMA-approved process called the Letter of Map Provision based on fill. They must do that so that when they eventually annex, the property will comply with our floodplain requirements and not impact our NFIP eligibility, which we've talked about a lot here recently. And honestly, at this point, I think they might want to do that on their own and not as part of this agreement because they experienced quite significant flooding a month ago. And so that improvement would benefit them as well. The fourth is that they agree to the provisions of our code of ordinances and the federal regulations that govern wastewater discharge. In summary, this requirement will prevent them from just dumping anything into the system. It has to meet the standards in those laws. We're waiting to receive what folks in that industry call the short form from them, which gives us the composition of their effluent, but we think that it'll be mostly distilled water. If it's more than that, these codes they've agreed to abide by give us the ability to add additional requirements onto their wastewater discharge, like pretreatment, before it comes to our plant. The fifth, and this is the big one, is that they agree to voluntarily annex the property into the city limits by the date of expiration of their county incentives, which is 12/31/2039. All right. The sixth, and this is a new one, council, one that was added by me and Mac, but one we think is important to implement the spirit of the directions you gave, and that is that if the company doesn't meet all the terms of this agreement, they must make us and our partners, the federal government and the county, financially whole again. So in this specific case, that would be a repayment of up to $5 million, which we'd distribute out amongst the other involved parties and to ourselves to cover our financial losses. And then another condition that won't be in the agreement per se, but that will be shared with the company in another forum, is that we're going to establish what I'm calling a shot clock. And folks, today is the first day of the basketball season, so my mind's going to be transitioning over to that. And essentially what that is a deadline by which the company has to agree to these terms or else the deal's off the table. And we've set that deadline as March 1st, 2025. We had originally talked about a sooner deadline, but because they've experienced such disruption because of the flood, we thought it would be in good faith to give them a little bit more time to ponder this agreement. So if those terms are agreeable to you, again, I ask that you record your agreement by passing the attached resolution. And if you do that, I ask that you also pass the second attached resolution accepting the $2.4 million Economic Development Administration grant. I confess that we're doing this out of order, and ideally, we'd like to have the agreement signed before we accept the grant, but the acceptance deadline is next week, and that was including a 2-week extension they've already given us. And with some of the turnover that might take place in Washington here over the next few weeks, I'd like to accept that grant before it perhaps disappears. And so, for that reason, we're putting the cart before the horse here. But in my opinion, it's okay to do that in this case, and the Land of Sky Council of Government shares this opinion, because the risk of accepting the grant without the deal in place is low. First, because Pisgah Labs has softly committed to these terms already, but second, because the Economic Development Administration says there's no penalty for returning the grant, and in fact, if for some reason this agreement fell through, they'd help us find another eligible project to spend the money on. So no real penalty for giving the money back if we have to. There might be a little bit of reputational damage, but I don't think they'd blacklist us or anything like that. So for that reason, I am asking you to also give staff and I the ability to accept the grant on our behalf and start working on this project. That's my summary. Burton Hodges is here to answer any questions about Pisgah Labs and their expansion. Aaron Winans from the wastewater treatment plant is here if you have any questions on the technical provisions of those wastewater codes. And I'll answer any, and Mac and I can answer any questions about the provisions of the agreement.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the terms of the agreement and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement on the city's behalf?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we will open discussion. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, first, I know that a ton of work has gone into this, and these things are not easy, but I'm hopeful at the end of this, you know, even if it is 15 years down the line, that this can be an example of, you know, collaboration and mutual respect and really a shared vision for the future between the city, the county, this private company, and also the state and federal government that are involved as well. So I think we've got a good balance here of trying to protect ourselves while also protecting, you know, the future benefits of the expansion of this company. So I feel like we're very close to a good place with this. I just have a couple of clarifying questions. Do we know whether the timeline that the shot clock sort of the shot clock idea introduces, is the company, have they accepted that timeline as an okay provision?
No, we have not discussed that shot clock yet.
Okay. And my other question was on the idea of them making us financially whole and our partners. Is that, what all does that include? Does that include just the payment for the extension of the water and sewer, or does that also include the tax revenue that we were giving up over that time, or what's the full scope of that?
It does not include the second part. It just includes the first part. all the cash that we would outlay, and then also a percentage for staff time and other in-kind resources that the city's going to expend in pursuit of this project. I will say, Councilmember Baker, that I think that's one of the provisions that ought to be negotiable. So, for example, if, Pisgah Labs agrees to the agreement and then something happens a year from now where they can't fulfill their terms, and we've spent $50K on, designing and engineering the thing, but haven't started building it yet, well, I don't necessarily think they should be penalized $5 million for that. But they should make us whole for the small amount that we have expended. So really, I guess it should read up to $5 million. And even that would, be after we've constructed the thing, put it in service, so on and so forth. Only then would that high penalty apply.
Okay. I think those are all my questions.
Mr. Daniel?
So, Burton, what conditions have you discussed?
We have discussed everything that is on the company's commitment list, except for I think the newest addition, which is the shot clock.
What about the making whole?
They have not been presented with that, as that has just been something that Wilson and Mac and I have just been discussing, and I think.
It's akin, I think, to the clawback provisions that the county would have.
Right, yeah, they're from.
It's just to make sure that we are, if the county claws back under their blow up, if things blow up, and the county has to claw back theirs, we want to make sure that we can claw back ours.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah,
I just wanted to know.
They're familiar with, as.
They're familiar with those terms
Yeah.
and those provisions.
But I have not shared anything based on these bullet points yet until you all have had a chance to discuss it, and then I have some guidance on what would be appropriate or not appropriate to share with the company.
Then I have another question. We sent a letter to the county. Is that part of this discussion?
Yes, we will ask them to make that commitment before we invest too much time and resources into this. We will accept the grant and we will start moving forward, but we won't take the big expensive steps until we have the commitment from them.
Okay, one thing that kind of stuck out at me is I would like to be reassured or fully assured that you as a city manager are negotiating this relationship with the county.
Yes, sir.
That would be my expectation. Thank you.
Mr. Wise?
Again, one of these complicated negotiations. Couple of questions. I'm not sure, Burton or Wilson, if they're for you. What kind of, do we expect any setbacks from Pisgah Labs because of the damage they received from the flood in terms of this timeline?
That's a good question. I think that the damage that they unfortunately are dealing with right now, it influence us a lot. They're having a tough time making decisions in general,
Yeah.
as they're still trying to figure out how to move forward. What Wilson alluded a little bit to it, what they're going to do in the future with FEMA and insurance and issues related to the damage that they received. So a lot of this negotiation, which Wilson illustrated, was positive and moving in a good direction, and compliments to partners with the city. We've made a lot of progress in the past couple quarters up until this disaster. So a lot of what they're experiencing right now has totally just shifted the attention,
Right.
which is challenging. So I'm yes and yes to your question.
This is a very small thing. We also talked about their adjacency to the Coosa Trail, and we were gonna work out some fencing.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I know that's a small thing, but the Coosa Trail is a big thing to me, and I'm kind of
yeah.
want to make sure that doesn't get lost in the
Yeah.
mix of, and then finally, we did send a letter to the county. Do we have any expectation of their response timeline for that letter?
No, sir.
Did we? And we didn't give them any timeline for it.
No, sir.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Morrow?
I just want to make, and it's a consideration, I think, and I don't know whether it gets into the necessarily in the negotiation, but I think it has to be stated, and I don't see it here anywhere, is that this is such a unique opportunity. This is not something, we're not setting a policy here, so that someone else could come in and want to do the same thing. The unique difference is because we use the historical Custa reference, where we actually had an existing business that wanted to invest, and this was allow them to do something. So it was sort of an exchange for an existing business.
Yeah.
But I don't, Mac, it's, it was sort of so unique and different that we'd struggle with this, at least I did. So, Wilson, I don't know how you say that, but at least when you deal with them, I think they have to know that this is not something that, this is not this wasn't, you had to fight to get this.
Yeah, understood.
Okay.
I think that we talked about adding a cover letter to the agreement to share things like the shot clock and some of the other expectations of ours.
Right.
I think we can add some language to that effect there.
To make
so that it's clear.
The criteria, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think, I'll be honest with you, Mac, just the forcefulness of what we are requesting in this it sends that same message. This is not something we do every day.
Right.
We're asking for a lot of concession. It's the wrong word. It's not concessions. We're asking for a lot from them in exchange for what they're getting. I think that's a pretty clear sign and signal to them and anyone else
That may come.
that may come bound. But I think putting it in a letter is an excellent idea.
Okay.
Okay, any additional discussion? All right, we have a motion on the table to approve the resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is approved. I believe we also now need a formal motion to accept, for the second resolution, accepting the $2.4 million EDA grant. Do I have a motion to accept that?
So moved?
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion on that, Mr. Wise?
None.
Mr. Morrow?
No.
Mr. Daniel? Mr. Baker?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved.
Thank you.
All right, that is the end of our unfinished business. We have no new business, and we will move on to remarks and future agenda considerations. And we will start with Mr. Wise.
All right, well, first off, I would love to welcome Selena Coffey. Is that Coffey? I wrote it down. Coffey.
Yes, sir.
Is that
her name.
correct? She's not here?
She's not here today. She starts on next Tuesday.
Excellent. Well, congratulations to her. Second is, as our mayor mentioned, Veterans Day is November 11th. And I do want to remind people that I think people get Veterans Day and Memorial Day confused, and they're both very important. Veterans Day, you have the opportunity to actually thank living veterans as well. So if you do know any, please go up and say hi and thank you if you're so inclined, as you should be, in my opinion. Third, tomorrow, if you haven't, please vote. And then fourth, we have talked a lot about our emergency response and how great it was, and thanks to all of our city staff. I don't know if we've actually specifically thanked Wilson for the amount of work he did in coordinating that. This whole effort was spearheaded by him, and I wanted to make sure that he understood that we have not forgotten about his efforts in lieu of all the efforts of our great city staff. So thank you, Wilson, for your efforts. I like making you uncomfortable like that in public. If you want to say anything, you can go right and go.
No, thank you.
That's all.
Mr. Morrow?
Well, in Dr. Holder's words, ditto.
Mr. Daniel?
Yes, I repeat, please vote, it's important. But I'd also like to mention that this Friday, I know that the mayor and city manager will be meeting with the League of Municipalities. And I'd like to speak as a council member to the city manager, that first of all, the city and the county's coordinated response to the storm was impressive, as has been duly noted often. And I would also say that in past crises, that the community and the city have been proven to be highly agile in our response to these sorts of things. The meeting that's going to be held, as I understand, is to discuss our current or present and future needs as a result of this storm, and I would like to give you my nickel's worth. I would say that our most pressing need, immediate need, as well as our greatest future need, is housing. And the storm has exacerbated our existing housing shortage beyond a crisis point. And as it was discussed at the last emergency housing group meeting, I think there needs to be a comprehensive assessment of homes damaged by the storm, and to know the cost to enable us to properly address funding. I think this effort would be most proficient with a full-time staff person to organize that data and to coordinate with the aid groups that have been mentioned, who are already doing an excellent job. I think if we could get this in a true organized fashion, it would be beneficial for everyone. And if there is help from any of these organizations that you will be meeting with, if there's help available, it would be welcome. Our long-term needs, the ongoing effort to increase our affordable housing, and more directly, how do we get low-income housing out of the floodplain? That's, I think, a great need. There's also, we have the need that many of the other towns in our area, of our downtown businesses, how are we going to address their needs? And what other ideas are out there? So I just wanted to make those statements, and that I feel like I would like to know how, and I hope that we get a report back, what you learn. But that's all I have to say.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on some of that. I feel like since the storm, obviously, there's some immediate impacts that have been occupying a lot of our attention and our minds over the course of these last few weeks. And I've also been thinking what our response long-term should be. And, we've talked many times in meetings here about the lack of buildable land and our position between, a large amount of public land that cannot be developed, and then a floodplain, a large floodplain, which limits, the space we have for the city to grow and to develop into the future. So I just feel like land use, which is always a hot topic for us, becomes even more important for us to manage that strategically with an eye far into the future, so that we don't put people in harm's way, of course, but we also allow for the types of development that are going to help with affordability and help with jobs in the county and in the city. So those are sort of general statements, but I'm hoping, as we get out of the sort of emergency mindset, that we can shift towards a more strategic mindset going forward, particularly as it deals with land use. I'll also just remind everybody that, of course, Election Day is tomorrow. I don't have to remind anybody, and I'm wishing everybody an extremely boring and mundane few days. Hopefully, no matter what happens, it is routine. And then a little bit of like sports corner. I need to name my sports corner when I talk about sports, but I haven't workshopped that yet, but I'll work on it. The cross-country team, the boys cross-country team at Brevard High School won back-to-back state championships, which is incredible. I'm sure, yeah, I think they were here last year and got recognized, so I assume we're going to be doing that again here in the future. I think I read that not only are they back-to-back, but they've won 3 of the last 4, which is pretty incredible. And there's a lot of other sports success happening in town. The Brevard College women's soccer team is in the middle of or towards the end of an undefeated season. They have not lost yet, and they are in the semifinals of their conference tournament. And they're playing Wednesday night in the semifinals. So they have not lost yet. That's never happened, I don't think, in the history of that program. So pretty remarkable. And the men's team, the soccer team over there is also having success. And the football team at Brevard College is not terrible, which is shocking to me as an alumni that was there the first year they brought football back, and we were bad for many years. So fun to see them having some success, and Brevard High is on the doorstep of a conference championship in football. So exciting stuff. I'll work on the sports corner with me, and that's all I got.
Okay, Mr. Attorney?
Nothing.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Yes, a few council member Wise stole my thunder. Indeed, we are welcoming Selena Coffey to our staff starting next Tuesday. She is a former assistant county manager in Henderson County and town manager of Weaverville, North Carolina, and she's agreed to come and join us here. And so I'm so excited to have such an experienced person joining our staff. And then, Mayor, this morning in our preview meeting, you asked about Emergency Operations Center debrief. And I think that the folks at the county's ears must have been tingling because they set it for Tuesday, November the 19th. And so Chief Cooper, Chief Jordan, and I, and some others will be attending the debrief then. And I'll probably have some stuff to report back to you all after that. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Yeah, just a few comments. A little more detail on what's going on still with all of our recovery efforts with the hurricane. They are continuing. We have a very good collaborative group that is working very hard on the temporary housing situation. I'm happy to say that we have 4 campers arriving this Friday. We have gotten the site that Habitat for Humanity owns at Woodland Terrace ready to go. A big thank you to Duke Power for getting the power up there. We've already got families assigned to the different trailers. And so we are slowly making progress. It is family by family. Several of these families were actually still in the emergency shelter where they had been living for, how many weeks has it been now? 5 weeks? So there still really is quite a lot of need out there. But we are making progress in terms of continuing to match them to houses, continuing to move more temporary housing solutions in. And I know there is also a wonderful initiative by the Platt organization raising money to purchase additional trailers. So a big thank you to both of our business community that has stepped up to help, and also to our nonprofit community that has been doing everything that they can to make this happen. As was mentioned, the manager and I will be going to the regional meeting. This is for all the mayors, managers, county chairs, and county managers that were impacted by the hurricane. So it will be an opportunity to really look at things strategically from a regional level in terms of not just the recovery and what's needed, today for the recovery, but for that long-term strategic look at the housing, at floodplains, at how do we really move forward in a coordinated fashion as a region to rebuild communities that have been decimated. So I think it will be a good opportunity to share lessons learned and to hopefully speak with the power of the region to our state and federal governments on what really is needed out here. So looking forward to that, and we'll obviously be providing feedback to the public and to council as to, what comes out of that meeting. We're still waiting for the actual agenda for it, which we don't quite have yet. So a lot still going on with the hurricane, and a lot that will be going on for quite a while. Another reminder, again, Veterans Day, next Monday. We also, and I believe the county, we've both got the green lights for the veterans going. If you see green lights out there, that is a way that we recognize that we are supporting, we are remembering, and we are telling our veterans that we are here for them. So when you see the green lights on our buildings, the county buildings, and on private buildings, that's what it means. So we also have a number of items ongoing for support for the community. And I will just mention again our community support group dealing really with the emotional impact of the hurricane. It meets Mondays from 9 to 11, except on the 11th, which is Veterans Day. It will be meeting for the next 5 weeks at Blue Ridge Community College. And there are posters around, and that is really to help people to sort of process what went on, to deal with the emotional trauma that a lot of people have been through. So please take advantage of that. It's free and it's open to the public, and it is a joint effort with Blue Ridge Community College and their nursing staff and the city of Brevard. And I believe with that, we have to go into closed session. So do I have a motion to go into closed session for pending litigation?
So
Get
moved.
that right, Mr. Attorney?
That's correct. City of Brevard versus Boslaw.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are now in closed session. Please stop the recording and please clear the room.
And the